Is liberty dying where you live? Escape to Keene at freekeene.com.
Good morning, Keenevention. Thank you for, first of all, coming out and being on time for our start this morning, because I know that as the first panel of the day, I know that was one of my concerns yesterday was, oh my gosh, are there going to be 3 people sitting here in the audience? And no, it turned out there were 22 yesterday, so thanks again for being here today. And I'm so grateful that everybody came out to really make this event a success. Of course, there's a lot going on today. We, of course, tonight have Galactic Bowling. So if you're going to be hanging out and you haven't yet put your name on the sign-up sheet for the bowling, it's there at the registration table. The raffle is going on today as well. Daryl Perry has tickets back there. That's 1 ticket for $1, 5 tickets for $6. No, 6 tickets for $5, 12 tickets for $10, and then you can get your height in tickets for $25. Today's prizes are, Daryl, what?
Knitted hats and mittens.
Homemade knitted hats and mittens from Kristen. Cop Block goodie bag.
And a date with Derrick J.
OMG, what? A date with Derrick.
Serenade you at karaoke, and anything else that happens is between 2
So yeah, you definitely don't want to miss out on your opportunity for a date with Derrick J. And I've been serenaded by Derrick J. before, and it's
I'm sure he'll respect your boundaries too, if you know whatever those are.
Again, good morning. I'm sure I'll figure out something else to tell you about later on here, but let's jump into this panel, the LGBT panel. There has been a lot of drama on Facebook recently between certain individuals about bigotry, etc., being in the liberty movement. I don't see it in the New Hampshire liberty movement personally. Obviously, we've got the big gay dance party that happens at the Porcupine Freedom Festival, which is a lot of fun, and so hopefully this panel will be a fraction of that fun. And the panel presenter is Dale Everett, who formerly has lived in Keene, actually owns a house in Marlborough. And Dale, I'll let you introduce all of your panelists. Thanks for being here this morning, everybody. Welcome to Keenevention.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Keenevention and the LGBT panel. We talked a little bit about what we want to cover today, but of course we want to leave a big chunk open for people to ask specific questions. So we're gonna try and not ramble on too much. But we brainstormed, and a few things we thought would be important to cover. First, we're all going to introduce ourselves. I'm going to let the other panelists introduce themselves, and then we're going to talk about first just what it's like to be lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgendered in New Hampshire, the Free State Project, and to some extent in Keene as well, for those of us who have an experience to talk about. And then we want to talk about what the activism community is like in general, just general libertarian activism in New Hampshire and how being LGBT impacts that. And then a little bit about specific LGBT activism in New Hampshire, because there's a lot of overlap. A lot of LGBT issues are freedom issues, and so there's certainly overlap, and there are things like pride and gay marriage in things and issues like that. So I figured those are 3 general things we'll discuss. I will give everyone an opportunity to have input on, and then we'll open it up to questions. So that's my thought on that. I'm Dale Everett. You might know me from a show called Flaming Freedom that I started along with my co-host Neil. His last name is weird because he does. He has several pseudonyms. He calls the show his Future Unelectability Podcast, I believe. So we do get a little risque at times, and then I've been in New Hampshire since 2007. I came up for PorcFest 2007. That's when I met Neil, actually. And that night decided I wanted to at least rent a room and figure out if I liked New Hampshire. And by Labor Day weekend, just a couple of months later, I was moving up into a room that I rented, and I just never left. So I've been here ever since then, and I bought property and settled in and nested. So I'm here for a good while, I imagine, at least. And so I've lived in Keene for a few years. I lived a little while on the seacoast, and then I settled down in Manchester, is where I'm at right now, and that's where I do the show out of. And mainly I do the show and run some properties and things like that to make my living, and that's me.
Morning, everybody. I'm Lauren. As most of you can probably guess, I represent the T in LGBT on this panel anyway. So I've lived in New Hampshire since about 2004, had a short stint for 2002, but really I feel more like a new mover because I was always super, super shy because I have this thing where I'm trans, and so I'm like, oh, I never really want to introduce myself to any of the activists here, even though I'm like totally blown away by what's going on up here. So I've been sort of hiding, and now finally, within the last like maybe even month, I've been sort of saying hello to everyone, and it's been incredible. I actually had nothing to fear at all. So it's been really great. Oh, thank you. But it's also been really cool being a part of this community because, you know, I watch people like Derrick here, who will introduce himself in just a minute, you know, stand up in Central Square and have a plant with him and get arrested for it. And I'm like, well, if people can like do that kind of stuff, I can totally wear a dress out in public and not really care that I'm not hurting anyone. So. Anyway, happy to answer any trans-related questions, or L sometimes. Anyway, so thanks.
Hey, I'm Sabbrielle. That's how you would know me and know this wonderful voice if you listen to the radio or the podcast. I'm on Flaming Freedom. I'm a co-host, so sometimes, and also Sex, Lies, and Anarchy lately with Antigone. She likes to bring me on because I'm a feminist and I'm proud to use that word, and she likes to argue semantics with me. So I represent the B in LGBT. I have a fiance named Caitlin who could not be here today, sadly. And she and I moved here 2 years ago in September 2011. And we moved to Manchester because Neil, this same Neil from... really? Okay, whatever. Okay, if he says that that's what he is. Said that I was very open to what city to move to, and I considered Keene for its lovely civil disobedience reputation, and then Neil got to us first, and our criteria were: is there an Indian restaurant? Is there at least one gay club? Those were our two criteria. So we said, all right, Neil, we'll move to Manchester.
There are four.
There are 4 gay clubs / gay bars in Manchester.
How many Indian restaurants?
Well, are you thinking of India Palace?
Did it close?
It moved. It's to a bigger location.
Oh, thank God. Okay.
I'll show you where it went.
Okay, awesome. India Palace moved. Okay,
It's a good sign. I think they needed a bigger space. So.
Okay, good. Because I just found that out Halloween night that it wasn't where I thought it would be, and I had a little bit of a panic attack. Anyway, so since I've moved to New Hampshire, I've been so happy. I think there's one homophobe in the entire Free State Project, and maybe 2, and everybody else is fantastic. I'm just so happy to be here. My life has changed radically, all for the better, and I have experience with civil disobedience with Occupy New Hampshire, and also doing Pride Fest in Manchester. So I might talk about that a little bit later. But anyway, yes, that's me, Sabbrielle, at your service.
Hello, I'm Derrick J. I moved to New Hampshire to Keene late March 2011, and I love it. That was a great decision, and I have no regrets about that. I do regret that right now I live in Philadelphia, not in New Hampshire, but I have plans to return next year when my suspended sentence is over for a little thing called The Victimless Crime Spree that you can check out, a little movie I made last year.
Oh, wow. You caught me off guard. That was so quick. Derrick's he's done so much, and his introduction was so short.
Because we all already know who Derrick.
Everybody knows Derrick.
Everybody.
No introduction necessary. All right, so I think I mentioned 3 general subjects I wanted us to each kind of have input on. And the first was just what's it like to be LGBT in New Hampshire, period. Sabbrielle just mentioned there are 4 clubs in New Hampshire. In Manchester. All right. As far as like other places in New Hampshire, I'm probably not the one to go into too much detail about that. I do know that Keene specifically is a college town, and I do know that the college has a very active LGBT club, and that they get a lot of support. That the college in general, the students there, when I've seen some of their events. We've been over there sometimes just coincidentally when they had events going on, and they seem to get. They don't seem to be holding protest rallies or anything like that. It doesn't seem to be necessary. They're just mostly holding educational and promotional events, and no one seems to be giving them any trouble about it. So I get the impression that the atmosphere in Keene is very friendly, that the college kids it's just the younger generation, I guess, is more progressive in general, and they don't seem to take much issue with it. So that's sort of my knowledge of the atmosphere in Keene. Again, just in general, not activism per se. And I live in Manchester. There are 4 clubs that I know of. One of them opened up recently. And it is important to note that New Hampshire is a rural state. That's why it was chosen. It was in the final vote because there was the potential to have a large impact because it's a low population state. And so I think that's something that we just have to be honest about, that it's not going to be, but we're close to Massachusetts and Boston and things like that. That's a nice perk if you want an urban environment just occasionally. It's not a bad commute to go to Boston if you want the big city. It's pretty clse.
There are cheap and easy buses too.
Oh yeah. That's often how I go because I don't like to drive down there. You can take a bus round trip for like $20. If it's a day trip, it's even cheaper. So it ends up being like maybe $20. And then there's also New York, which I've been to recently. It's not a bad commute to go down to New York for a long weekend and things like that. So we're in a nice location. We're essential to a lot of bigger cities if you want to go to those kinds of things. And so there's that. I think we're doing pretty good though to be a fairly small city. Manchester is a fairly small city compared to to be the biggest city in New Hampshire, and yet still has 4 clubs, which is I think doing pretty good. And this is an interesting factoid that I'm afraid I'm going to forget to mention, so I'm going to do it now. New Hampshire was surveyed out of some survey that was done recently. New Hampshire was supposedly has the highest proportion of this per capita basis of LGBT folks in the country. So now I think that was not counting DC because that's not a state. The District of Columbia is this very small but very highly densely populated area, and I think they might have outdone us, but they're not a state. So we won for like the highest per capita LGBT
the gayest
population.
State in the union.
Who would have thought, right? So that's interesting. I think we have a lot of sort of I think probably part of the reason why I think New Hampshire might be popular for people to sort of settle in. I think we may very well have a lot of sort of quiet, settled-in couples that happen to be gay. And another factoid about New Hampshire is we were the first, maybe this belongs in the political section, but whatever. We were the first state to get gay marriage through the legislature and not have it happen by the courts. Like our legislature actually voted it in. And I think that happened when we were predominantly Democrat. But then later, we do have our ultra-conservatives. They're everywhere. And there's the little niche of ultra-conservatives. And I'm calling ultra-conservative meaning socially wanting to control other people's lives, not being libertarian in that particular respect. And those folks did push to end gay marriage in New Hampshire. And during a Republican-controlled legislature, we overwhelmingly voted that down. So there were a lot of the Republicans here in New Hampshire are libertarian-minded Republicans, and they're socially more progressive and conservative, fiscally conservative, which is I think that reflects very nicely on New Hampshire, just the general environment here. It gives you an idea of the sort of the atmosphere here. It is a more secular state in general. There are churches, of course, but I think you don't feel that there's a sense of it being just in general a strong separation of church and state, which is important for your religious freedom and things like that. Because even LGBT folks are all over the spectrum when it comes to religion. And so that's the general atmosphere here. I don't think I've ever had my sexuality. I'm gay, by the way. I don't know if people want to point out specifically what they are. I'm not bi. I'm the G in the LGBT. And I don't think I've ever seen it become an issue. I've never been insulted on the street. I guess I'm not that obvious or anything, but I've never had it become an issue in anywhere. But then again, I haven't been out job searching. So maybe some other people can. I've been self-employed the whole time, so maybe some other people can give their thoughts on that. So everyone, share your thoughts on, in general, what it's like being on the spectrum here in New Hampshire.
I have had some issues, but they haven't been in New Hampshire. They've actually been in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, just some name calling and such. But I'd say, what is it like in New Hampshire? It's for a trans person. I mean, what is it like anywhere? It's kind of a. I mean, it's such a small population anyway. It's kind of hard to tell, but I believe in New Hampshire, if you want to get your gender marker on, say, your state driver's license, if that's important to you, which for me it's not important. Don't really care so much about those documents. You have to actually prove that you've had some kind of surgery on your genitals. It's a whole huge, crazy process. So they're behind in a few things in this area, but in other ways, I think there's a lot of open-minded people, at least from what I've discovered. Although I've been hanging out, I think, with the right crowd lately, so my opinion may not be the most accurate one. Sab?
Hi, again. Okay, so what's it like? As somebody who's getting married in June, I have cause to talk about I have cause to talk about my relationship status, and implied, and sexual orientation is implied there when I say, yeah, I'm getting gay married, to strangers, retailers and stuff like that. And so when you go to a bridal expo and there's a little, you have your raffle card and it's what's the groom's name, and you cross out groom and you're her name is Caitlin. So that's cause for every single time that I share that with somebody, it's going to be, it's a little bit of a risk, but as time goes on with no negative consequences and nobody being weird about it, it's not, my confidence grows and it's not a big deal anymore. In fact, there was a wedding expo recently that was in Nashua that was just for the gay and lesbian community, which was pretty exciting because, we weren't going to be the odd couple out. And there were retailers from all over New Hampshire and some from Mass who were not just, okay with their customers being LGBT, but were actively seeking those customers. So I think that that there is a lot more freedom and a lot more just ease of moving through the world here in New Hampshire than there is in other parts of the country. Like Dale said, when a group in the state legislature tried to repeal gay marriage last year. I just want to give some more specific numbers because I think this is pretty remarkable. It was a 75% Republican majority, something in that area, and the measure to repeal gay marriage was blocked by a 2/3 majority. So I think that really says a lot about the political climate in New Hampshire. And I do want to change some of the laws because they still affect our lives whether we like it or not. I'm going to run as a Liberty Dem next year on the harm reduction principle of politics, and I want to make it easier for same-sex couples to raise children together, and also to make the state back off about their gender identity in their documents. It's like, is this your business? No, so screw off. I don't know how profane I can be for the YouTube video. F off, state.
Maybe someone will go back and put in bleeps.
Yeah. So I think that's what I wanted to say about being bi and such in New Hampshire.
I'm going to anticipate some questions, if that's okay. And one of them is, are you doing a state marriage?
Yes. Sorry, we're getting a state marriage. We want the benefits, the legal benefits that come with a state marriage, like being able to share, health insurance through your employer, and power of attorney, and visitation rights if we're in the hospital, and medical decisions. I mean, there's like 2,500 different things that comes along with a legal marriage, and I do want to raise kids maybe in like 5 years, so it'll make it easier if Caitlin and I are married. I don't want anybody questioning our parental status, so.
I think we'll add that to the topics today, by the way, because I know that's a contentious issue for a lot of libertarians. It's the notion of the state being involved in marriage at all and how that affects gay marriage and things like that. So this isn't something I've discussed frequently on the show and other times, so we'll probably just chime in on that briefly too and give our thoughts on that. So
yeah, I don't think anybody thinks, nobody I know thinks that the state should be involved in marriage. So, but as long as it is,
but they are.
But they are. So as long as it is, it needs to be universally available.
So what's it like being gay in the Free State? It's great. Like I said, I'm delighted and don't regret moving, but I didn't move to the Free State to find other gays. I moved here for activism, and so it's been a part of my life, but activism really was primary, and relationships secondary. It's just another part of who we all are, right? Also, you mentioned gay bars and the proximity to restaurants for some of your moving decisions. And I would just want to mention, that wasn't something that I sought out initially, like how many bars. I did assume there were gay bars in Keene, which is not the case. And, I come from Philadelphia, and so I have a skewed view of what the world's going to be like.
I think there are some bars that have gay nights, aren't there? Yeah. Okay.
Right, but not enough that it was something that I was interested in pursuing. Thankfully, we live in 2013, and there are apps for that. I mean, like you can find relationships on your cell phone. It's not tough, and so depending on old style gay bars, I mean, I think even one of the most popular gay bars in New York City is closing its doors, and they're blaming Grindr, which some of you may know is an app that you can find other gays on. But yeah, gay men only, exclusively. I'm sorry. There are other apps. There's a wide variety. Technology doesn't discriminate. But
they've literally digitized gaydar now. It's just it's in your phone.
So what I'm saying is, location and proximity is not as important as it used to be, thanks to technology. And that's been the case for me. I've been able to find other gays in my area using Grindr in Keene. And so they're out there, but it's gay bars and it's not my scene. But everyone has been super accepting. I think that deserves repeating. You know, just because it's mostly straight people doesn't mean...
You just forget about it, don't you? I mean, you just kind of forget about it because it becomes a non-issue most of the time. Yeah, that's my experience. Is I don't stress and freak out all the time about being gay because it really is not an issue for the most part.
Right. Gayness was almost more a part of my identity in Philadelphia than it is here. It's just like we're just all people here. It doesn't matter what
that's what it feels like in the I mean, most of my friends are straight people in the activist community, and it's just such a non-issue for 95% of the time that it's not. You don't think about it.
I agree.
So I would say, and that's what it's like being gay in New Hampshire. It's like being straight in New Hampshire. Until you're trying to meet someone for a date or something. So there you go. Okay, so let's talk about activism next. Does that sound? Did I give you enough time to finish your thought? So activism. Well, I think we'll just blend this all together. There's the two aspects of it. There's general libertarian activism that we're all involved in, because all of us care about all the other stuff that libertarians care about. We might be a little bit more attentive to issues that affect us personally, which are the LGBT issues. But all of that really falls under libertarian activism. And one of the first things I want to say is I cannot get over how much support I have from straight allies when it comes to LGBT issues of freedom. We'll get into marriage as one of those things because that is a contentious issue with libertarians. But yeah, I've had incredible support. Gay marriage, when gay marriage was an issue a couple of times here in New Hampshire, there was just as much of a turnout from all of my straight allies for all the other libertarian issues. They were there, even though it didn't affect them personally as much as it might affect me and some of my friends in the spectrum. They were there for it because it was a freedom issue. And so that was really, that's really a check mark for the Free State Project, in my opinion, that they were so, they're consistently freedom advocates. And so I've been really impressed with that. And I've been involved in all kinds of activism, of course. Most of my activism is not LGBT related, unless you count the fact that I do a show every week, and that's mostly media. Just educating people, and I guess I'll talk about the show a little bit. The show, it is, I say it's a show for discussing LGBT issues from a liberty perspective, which is probably something you don't hear a lot of. I think there's an impression of LGBT folks being mainly liberal and being big government in most respects, other than those particular issues where they want the government out of their lives. And then, but then there are some conservative groups like Log Cabin Republicans, and there's another one, if I can remember them, that's a Republican group for gays. But again, they're mostly traditional conservatives in a lot of respects, with just a few exceptions where they still want big government in everyone's lives. They're still big military folks and all of that, but they believe in gay marriage, and usually they have very conservative social values that they still want to impose on people, with this one exception that we're no longer picking on people for being gay or lesbian. And so there are those sorts of groups, but I try to have a voice for a libertarian attitude on these particular subjects, especially. And let's see. So that's activism in general. Marriage is one of the things I wanted to talk about. It's a contentious issue because most libertarians, their attitude on marriage is get government out of it, period. And that's it. It's the end of discussion. So then there's no contention. There wouldn't be any contention there. If we just get government out of it, your church would do what your church wants to do, and would not do what they don't want to do, or whatever community you're involved in, you could have a secular marriage and so forth. And that really is how it ought to be. And what I often try to tell people is I'm definitely for that, getting government out of marriage. But I'm for getting government out of everything. Like everything. Taxes, stop taxing us, all kinds of things. And I can list like almost everything I can talk about that I want government to get out of. Marriage impacts it in some kind of way. right? It affects how much taxes you pay. I get taxed if I'm a gay couple. I'm not at the moment, but if I were a gay couple, I would get taxed for that, unless the government acknowledges that private contract that I have made with another person. So I try to get libertarians to look at gay marriage, and yes, I push for government to stop discriminating with respect to their marriages when it comes to gay people. And the reason I do that is because they're involved in our lives whether we like it or not. And getting them out of it is going to be a multi-stage process, getting them to stop taxing us, getting them to stop recruiting us into the military, getting them to stop controlling our health care. The way our health care is, that impacts everyone, and gay marriage impacts that as well. And as long as they're involved in all these things, you can't get them out of marriage until you get them out of all of that, because all of that is affected by marriage. They treat you differently depending on whether they have acknowledged your marriage or not. And so I try to get libertarians to look at it as, we believe in private contracts. We believe that I should be able to enter into a contract with anyone else about a marriage, maybe more than one person, frankly. I see marriage, if you really want to look at what marriage means, I say it means that it's your chosen family. It's not about sex. It's not about the benefits. What it really is, and the only sense that it affects benefits is because the government treats you differently depending on who they consider to be your family. Right? They might give you tax credits or some other kind of insurance options, things like that, depending on whether someone is considered your family. And you have people who are your family by blood, and you have people who you choose to be your family, and that's what I think marriage is about. Whether you have sex with them is a total another issue. Someone could be family to me, and I would want them to be married to me. We might not be having sex. I don't think that should have any issue as to whether someone's your family. And it seems obvious, right? Like, it's almost uncomfortable to talk about having sex with your family, right? But unless it's a spouse, but it is. It's your chosen family, and that's how people should look at it. And the only question is, will government acknowledge that I've chosen this person to be my family and they have agreed to it, or will they not acknowledge it? And for as long as they're interfering in our lives, we have to take gay marriage into account. So I'm going to keep fighting for getting them out of marriage, but as long as they're in it, I'm going to fight for them to not discriminate on the basis of gender. So that's my attitude. I think that's the way I deal with that subject. And the other thing that I would say about it is, I do have friends who support the notion of gay marriage, that people should be able to, but they're terribly concerned that certain churches, they're going to start forcing churches to do gay marriages and things like that. And I think it's a valid concern. A lot of people are dismissive about it. A lot of liberals are dismissive, saying, no, they're not going to do that. But I've seen evidence of them starting to push things like that in other countries. And we seem to eventually follow along in a lot of the socialist respects of other countries. So it is a valid concern, and it's one that I'm willing to keep fighting for people's freedom for. Don't make someone, if your personal feelings and your religion are against this, that's not the government's place to make your church accept it. It's just their place. It's the only place for the government is to get out of my business and let me run my life the way I want to run it my life. So, I think I'll let some other people talk from there, because you can talk about pride and other forms of activism and things like that.
Since you're on the topic of marriage and trying to get the state out of your marriage, or have the state out of everything for that matter, I can say that in New Hampshire, it's actually really easy. If you want to no longer have the state recognize your marriage, it's really easy to get divorced in New Hampshire. I won't go through the whole story because it's a rather sad one. But yeah, it's really, really, really easy. Although you do have to pay a fee, so some people might not feel comfortable paying money to leave a relationship, but it is pretty easy. As far as the whole general political climate and the way that people see activism or see any kind of other political thing going on here in New Hampshire, I feel like it's a small town, and that's good and that's bad. It's bad in that because it's kind of rural and people are isolated, there are some people out there hiding in the woods who still don't quite get what it means to be gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, whatever the... There's so many. I'm still trying to figure out what the whole... There's like a plus. We just add a plus sign to the end of it. That's what I go with.
I think Q is one of the latest things that means questioning.
Well,
but my opinion is you don't get a letter until you decide.
As a side note, let me... So there's a bunch of folks down, like friends of mine in Massachusetts, who do a lot of political activism, and they're fighting for trans rights or gay rights, and I really think we should abolish the letters and just have a big H for human rights. That's where I'm at. Although I've got some issues with gender, sexuality, and such, which I'm happy to talk about either now or after the panel. But anyway, to get back to just the general political climate of New Hampshire, I'd say that so there's some really isolated people, but at the same time, you get that small town feel, even at the state level, where people just they recognize you as a person. I feel like some of the other states with the larger populations, representatives who just aren't as accessible as they are here in New Hampshire, you kind of get brushed aside, and you don't really get that human face associated with the political issue. And that's one thing that I appreciate about New Hampshire that actually has nothing to do with the FSB. It's just in general, for many years, it's been a place where people really recognize these issues up close and personal. So, and then also, I feel like a lot of folks here have a sort of live and let live scenario or policy. So, maybe they don't understand or they're not accepting, but they want to be left alone, and so they'll leave you alone as well. All you.
Right. Okay. So this is this is activism in general, and activism
where are we going?
Right. Okay. So first, I want to say that one of the hardest things about being in the LGBT community in Western New York was that it's so leftist. I mean, they all just took for granted that Obama was on our side and that Republicans were evil and Democrats were virtuous, and I got away from that so completely when I moved to New Hampshire that when Caitlin and I went to Maine last year to help them with their efforts to get gay marriage, we were hoping to find some libertarian libertarian-leaning people there and be like, hey, New Hampshire is like right next door. Maybe you should come with us. And we pulled into the parking lot with our little like Gadsden flag on our car and our little porcupine magnet. And it's just Obama stickers and, what's her face? Elizabeth Warren stickers on all the cars. And we go in and they're all like just blatant statists in this like phone banking center, and Caitlin and I, kind of huddled and did our calling thing and our data entry thing, and then we left, and it was kind of a relief to come back to the libertarians who don't think that way. So if you're sick and tired of the leftists and you're LGBT, then this is the place to be. It really is. I think that because I try to appeal to the liberal side of the spectrum, because I do think that a lot of people can be converted to liberty, not to gayness. And
we're working on that on Flaming Freedom too. Like, how do we convert straight people to gay? It's very challenging.
And I credit a lot of that to reading Mary Ruwart's Healing Our World in an Age of Aggression, because you learn how to speak the language of loving, of tolerance and love. And if you really believe in love and tolerance, then you believe in liberty. And so when Caitlin and I were part of Occupy New Hampshire, there were a lot of leftists there and a lot of confused people there and a lot of confused leftists. And I think it actually helped that we were that we were like clearly identifying as not straight because they couldn't write us off as conservatives. So their mindset, the mindset of some of the people there was so black and white that we just our very identity kind of kept them from categorizing us and writing us off. So we got a lot more traction in Occupy New Hampshire because we weren't just conservatives, and they couldn't comprehend not being a supporter of the state, and as well as being LGBT. So I think that we did a lot of good representing the Free State Project throughout Occupy New Hampshire, and that we were able to kind of use their collectivist biases against them, against their will to stay frozen in their current mindset. So that was actually an advantage in activism for us. And
didn't that also lead to you being more involved in Pride, or was it the other way around?
Yes, and then
the Free State involvement in Pride.
Right. And New Hampshire, prior to summer 2012, New Hampshire had not had a Pride like participating in Pride Fest. Like a lot of it's a big thing in all major cities and most minor cities and even small towns now. Like June, you have your parade and your festival. And being the gayest state in the union, we thought, well, New Hampshire should have a Pride Fest. And a lot of people in Occupy, that kind of spun off as a side project as Occupy died down. And so I was involved in New Hampshire Pride Fest last year, and it was kind of we got attention because I don't know if you remember Chick-fil-A, but that was a national level issue, was people boycotting Chick-fil-A because the CEO or they donated money to like anti-gay organizations, not just in America but in Africa, to try to get homosexuality like criminalized or like the death penalty and really extreme stuff. So some of the people from New Hampshire Pride Fest approached the one Chick-fil-A in New Hampshire, which was in Nashua, and the owner said, I am so against corporate policy in this area. I have LGBT employees, I have LGBT customers, and I want to give my middle finger to the corporate Chick-fil-A. And why are you shaking your head?
No, I think you're overstating their position, because they actually were questioned about that, and they were trying to be diplomatic about everything, but they were not flagrantly challenging the national policy.
Okay, well, no, I mean, I am exaggerating, but he wanted to participate. No, he wanted to participate in Pride Fest because he disagreed with the corporate policy.
He wouldn't officially say that. That's all I'm saying.
Well, okay.
They wouldn't publicly come out and say that's my position.
Oh, okay.
He did say he wanted to have.
Well, how could he publicly come out with that position?
Yeah,
really? I want to give the middle finger to the major corporate. No, you can't say that.
So I thought that this was a great.
But he definitely was trying to be. He was trying to be cool about the whole thing, and
he was trying to help the gays in New Hampshire.
He was sort of trying to extend a fig leaf, and
yeah. When we went to, when we were going to businesses and saying, do you want to sponsor us? Do you want to have a booth?
Real quick, I want to encourage all the panelists to talk right into it, like your microphone, like this.
Yeah, like this.
The angle.
Like.
Yeah, this is not as good as
this.
This
is bad. Okay, I'm used to doing this on the show, so I'll
straight
hold it
into
like this. Okay.
Our microphones are the opposite.
Yeah.
So
sorry, people.
We're talking to the sides of them, and.
Anyway, okay, so the Nashua Chick-fil-A owner was not pleased with the corporate Chick-fil-A policy. And to demonstrate that, he wanted to be involved in New Hampshire Pride Fest. Is that a subdued enough statement for you, Dale? You weren't actually on the Pride Fest committee.
I think what we
I'd
can
like to
agree
draw
is
attention to
that
this.
we all suspect that he disagreed more strongly than he was allowed to publicly say. He did want to come and extend a fig leaf at Pride.
Dale was not on the Pride Fest committee, just for the record. But no, you're right. I shouldn't exaggerate, especially when I shouldn't exaggerate. But anyway, so people on the national level who didn't really understand thought that we were trying to like help this Chick-fil-A recover their reputation, or we were giving them like it became a big deal in other like the No Hate campaign said like boycott New Hampshire Pride Fest. But yeah, it was a little ridiculous. So that was so the Nashua Chick-fil-A came and they gave out chicken sandwiches. We didn't like advertise for them, or they didn't vend, they didn't sell anything, they just gave out free food. And I thought it was a great example of New Hampshire individuals and New Hampshire businesses bucking national trends. And it was a great example of New Hampshire unity when the rest of the country is dividing over these petty issues. So that was a New Hampshire LGBT specific issue that I was involved in. So hopefully we didn't get to do Pride Fest this year. I think a lot of people were just worn down by the Chick-fil-A scandal, and so but hopefully in 2014 we'll bring it back.
Well, I did, but what I was hoping you'd mention is that the Free State some other activists, not the Free State Project specifically. It's important to note that the Free State Project doesn't really do anything activism related. It's just the medium to get everyone here, and then they join specific organizations that they believe in and work through those. But there were some people who moved here as part of the Free State Project who also helped with Pride, who were not LGBT. They helped with security, for instance. Church of the Sword actually helped sponsor Pride, so that they were a corporate, the 501c, I believe, or something.
Church of the Sword isn't 501c.
Oh, it's not?
No.
Okay, well, they had some kind of nonprofit status or something that allowed them to...
Yes,
What's that?
they
Okay.
have state nonprofit.
Okay, so they had a state-only sort of status that allowed them to file for the event, so that they didn't have to form a corporation just to have Pride. So Pride was actually made possible this last year by Church of the Sword and activists who came here as part of the Free State Project. So that was pretty cool too.
It's true.
Wow, what an awesome story about Chick-fil-A. I think that is so cool. Well, these panelists have been more involved in LGBT, LMNOP issues than I have while in New Hampshire. But I did get my start in activism here on Flaming Freedom, which was your show. It is your show, Dale. And so that was like... I guess that was the most gay activism that I had done and have done since. But there's always room for competition since it's only one gay show. So if you wanted to start your own, there's still room. I also I wanted to make notes on this because this was a little tougher for me. I don't do like gay activism, but some things in the activism that I've done, I feel like have been colored by the fact that I'm gay. For example, when I was patted down by Michael Kopcha for having a dance party, I made some comments about him enjoying it, and he got real rough with me. And I think that was motivated. I've heard other people talk about how that might be motivated by hate. And that was just one of the things, we can never know, but that's one of the things that people think about is like, well, did the cops pick on you more because you're gay or weak or appear like an easy target. I don't know. It's just something I thought about because then again, being tackled by Officer Moore, it just seemed to come out of left field. I just wonder if they're motivated by that at all. Because while the people in New Hampshire and the Free State people have all been accepting, I would say there is an exception for police that I've heard that they, within their ranks, and this isn't something I knew.
But on that line, maybe you can talk about your experience in jail and how much you feel like that was affected.
Yeah, well, that's a flip side of the coin, actually, because in jail they were way more accepting. But I've heard personal anecdotes about police in Keene who were had their lockers teased or damaged, or a picture of them. Like, I think after the Kopcha arrest, when this man, Michael Kopcha, arrested me, his locker was damaged by fellow cops or something. They were picking on him for being a gay lover. And I did some of my own private research and found out on Facebook that he has a gay brother. So I'm wondering, these people who are interacting with our lives, they've all got their own stories. And I guess just the best thing is to be strong and know who you are and not be afraid of that. But yeah, I think it colors our experience a little bit. So being tackled by Officer Moore and patted down by Kopcha, I think they had something to do with being gay. Also, you mentioned the Occupy movement. That was a good in. It's really great to be able to almost be like, it's not the same as saying, I'm a socialist, I'm one of you, but it's
there was a socialist faction of Occupy, wasn't there, that tried to branch off and corporatize in order to exclude people, which was completely counter to what Occupy was all about.
Yeah.
That's Sabbrielle's personal experience. She could tell us the most about it, but they actually tried to form a corporation. They're anti-corporate. That's their definition. And that's what Occupy was.
Yeah.
And they formed a corporation so that they could specifically exclude people who said things like, we shouldn't kick people out if they open carry or something like that.
I could tell you so many stories about Occupy New Hampshire, but that could be its own panel.
Yeah, it's probably its own panel.
Well, along the same line of thinking, though, it's worth mentioning that it can be an advantage to be gay in this way. If you want to do effective activism, it's easier to reach out to a group that wouldn't be so excited or be motivated to get involved in Thanks But No Tanks, for example. But
yeah, I think
you reach out to the college.
They gave Sabbrielle the benefit of the doubt because she was gay.
Right.
Versus if she just showed up and said, I'm a libertarian, I want to get involved, maybe they wouldn't have. I don't know. And then she found a lot of people who were not free staters, who were people who already lived here and things like that, who got interested in some libertarian subjects and issues.
But I wish it was reason that won the day and not bias.
Well, bias gets you in the door, and reason... I wish I could finish that metaphor.
No, it's you play the cards you're dealt, right?
Yeah,
it got her foot in the door, and then she actually convinced a lot of them to become more libertarian, I think. That's the impression I got.
There's now a category of people called porcupiers. And
cool.
I take a lot of credit for that. I'm just going to...
Just to round out the couple of notes I had about activism and being gay, I was concerned when I did high school outreach. There's still this lingering fear that every gay person is also a pedophile. And so being in the high school or being around kids, I was a target and I got some things shouted at me about that. So, whatever. You get things shouted at you as a gay person, you're going to experience that eventually. But being at the high school, that made it uncomfortable. I stopped doing that kind of activism.
It was something they could use against you. They didn't like you because of your activism. And the fact that you were gay was something they could, we can scare people about this because everyone's scared of pedophiles and people have this notion.
Right. But to totally surprise you, and I hope this does surprise you, in jail, everyone was accepting that I was gay. The inmates, the officers, everything. It was totally cool. There was one guy who was I was 3 weeks into being in jail, and he was like, "Don't let people know you're gay." I'm like, "They already know, man." And he was worried, you know, because he had been in prison for a long time, and he had seen in the past what happens, and it can be really bad in some experiences. But here, where in my experience, it was totally safe to be openly gay in jail, and I had
You were
no
probably,
fears about that.
I have to say, though, one of the things you could say about Keene, I mean, you don't want to brag about the jails necessarily, but as jails go, they're supposed to suck, and I would say that as jails go, I mean, if you got to be in one, the Keene one is... Wouldn't you say? I mean...
It reminded me of school, so
people
it's not more uncomfortable than school.
Right.
Really.
Well, if you want to compare it, for instance, to Valley Street, which is the main jail in Manchester, which is I've heard is one of the worst jails to be in. Now, I'm specifically talking about jails versus prisons. There's very different institutions. Jail is usually a shorter term stay for certain types of crimes, and prison is usually longer term, and so forth.
This is a place where you are expected to get naked on a daily basis and show very private parts of your body to strangers in jail. It happens, and it's not something that we always say, but it's true, and I expected someone to say something or to tease me, and that never happened. I was never treated differently. So
I remember
I think that's worth mentioning.
There was some debate before because you were expecting to go in, you had a date to show up and everything for your civil disobedience, and I remember there was some debate about whether you should say, whether you just tell them you're gay.
I was terrified if I should be open or not, but it came out within 3 days.
The question is, will they be careful? Might they segregate you in certain situations for your safety, or might they even pick on you? And you're saying they did not pick on you, though.
They did not pick on me. I did ask to have my room changed to a room with someone who I was into, but. They didn't do that, and to punish me, they actually gave me a roommate who had been in prison for 8 of the past 10 years of his life, and he was a really scary guy to room with. He was not into gays. He was not okay with that. I did say that the inmates were all cool with that. He was the only exception, and it really stunk.
So your actual roommate was the only one who wasn't cool?
Just for the last 2 weeks or so,
okay.
Yeah. He was very scary and threatened me, and jail does nothing about that. But yeah, otherwise, the jail experience was shockingly comfortable.
I guess,
for lack of a better term.
We can probably open it up to questions at this point.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Good?
I saw we had questions.
Well, I think we have time for... Yeah, we've got a little time for some questions.
So, yeah, as someone who's neither L, nor G, nor B, nor T, I have a question about...
Which letter do you prefer?
He's questioning us. He's Q.
I'm curious about, how this construct came to be with perhaps... Why is it just these 4? And because I had an atheist meetup group for a while in Virginia. I'm originally from Wisconsin, but I've lived in Virginia for about 10 years. And there were several people in the atheist meetup group who were polyamorous, and they were touting the benefits of that. And but P isn't included, at least right now. But I know it can be very heavily stigmatized. And my girlfriend of 3.5 years, when we were together, she's my ex now, I said, if we ever get married, so I have these friends in my atheist meetup group, and they were saying how it's, how it works so well, and they read Sex at Dawn and so forth. And, she didn't react well to that, so we didn't break up right at that point, so I kind of just, tabled the issue. And, and I told my parents about it, and, I was sent to a strict Lutheran school back in Wisconsin, and they're very strict religious type folks. And so, they weren't, they kind of reacted very negatively too, that I was, I guess you could say, poly-curious, but never practiced. But people say, well, we're wired more like chimps, and chimps are polyamorous, so maybe we're all poly, and we're either accepting of it, we're all, the ones who aren't are in denial. But so my question is there sort of maybe a litmus test for this construct of LGBT, whereby the people in LGBT, people in those 4 categories have historically experienced violence, whereas maybe other alternative sexualities like polyamory, not so much so, if any, really measurably at all. So perhaps is the LGBT construct based on who's experienced violence, and people who are, the letters that are not included are stigmatized but maybe not victimized with actual violence?
guess I should answer this. I'm polyamorous, so I've thought about how if poly people fit into that spectrum, if they should be included. But I have this is what I think is the reason that T is in the LGBT spectrum is because it's a question of sexual orientation, right? Like who you're attracted to. But a lot of trans people start out identifying as gay before they realize that their gender is. Am I speaking out of turn? Or
they identify as being straight before they figure things out for themselves.
Okay.
In fact, I think that's far more likely from what people that I've met anyway. Okay, well, that's the way that the gay rights movement has evolved is inclusion of trans people, and I try not to bring my polyamory into my I try not to make it part of my LGBT activism, especially in questions of marriage, because I don't want to slow that down. Because a lot of people, I guess, because a part of the opposition is, well, if it stops being just one man and one woman, then it can be, it can be anything. It can be like polygamy and stuff. And since we all see it as, I assume we all see it as a question of individual rights, and nobody should have to, the state shouldn't you shouldn't be able to vote on what kind of relationships are valid. If you don't think somebody's relationship is valid, don't acknowledge it. But from a legal perspective and a gay marriage perspective, I feel an obligation to not to take it one issue at a time, and hopefully as people see that marriage should not be a state issue, it'll be, oh yeah, polygamy, well, that's some people's thing and it's not other people's thing. And so the poly community is obviously a lot more LGBT friendly, and I think that there could be and it's also
they almost have to be, right? As soon as you have more than two people, there's going to be some same gender issues.
I mean, it could. I mean, theoretically,
if you find me three people, well,
are you saying there's only two genders?
No, you're right. You got me. So the gender is a spectrum, just like sexual orientation. That's something we're constantly trying to educate people on the show about. That gender is not strictly binary, as it turns out. Even
which is why I don't like the term bisexual, because it enforces the gender binary. But pansexual is just too broad. Like, that sounds like I could be attracted to like this table or something, like
pots and pans.
Pots and pans,
Well, I do want to answer your question directly before I expound on that a little bit. And you said, is there a litmus test, like what categorizes what gets a letter or not? And the answer, I strongly believe, is no. There's no litmus test. It's a constant debate. It's ongoing. Just this is what generally in the culture is accepted as the letters. And they're always talking about, do we add some letters? Should we take out some letters? I'm active on a trans forum, even though I'm not trans, maybe because I'm doing the show and I feel like I should stay educated on these issues. I am active on a trans forum, and there's a thread pops up on a regular basis, almost on like every 2 or 3 weeks or every month. A new thread comes up. Should we get the T separate from the LGB? And trans people are almost evenly divided about whether they want to stay as part of it or separate it, and they think they're separate issues. Usually they're almost consistently supportive of everyone's rights, but it's just a debate of whether all the letters belong together and things like that. So there is no litmus test. It's always going to be debated and argued, and whether poly should be added to that. I support, like I said, marriage is about choosing who your family is. I wouldn't even say polyamorous marriage. I would say maybe poly marriage. Because amorous implies that there's maybe a sexual or a romantic relationship, when I don't think that's necessary for a marriage. I think it's wanting someone, feeling close enough to someone that you want to be your family, and there may be no sexual feelings in there. That shouldn't matter. I think we want to go ahead and take another question. Do you have something to say on that? It's
a question of common interests and common goals. And if enough poly people think that they have enough in common with the LGBT community, and vice versa, if enough LGBT people think they have enough in common with the poly community, then it'll start being, a common identification. But until that tipping point, we're at a standstill, and the communities are.
We've got several people lined up for questions, so I think we'll try to give everyone a chance to ask something.
Hi, it's nice to see another poly here. I've been poly for about 40 or 45 years now. You've been talking around adding that Q at the end. I think common practice lately, for a couple of years at least, even college courses have studies in LGBTQ. And I know the Danish Institute for Study Abroad includes the Q at the end for all of their courses. And you've been kind of talking around it, and there are a couple of intermingled points. For instance, the fear of pedophilia among some, and the fear that we're trying to convert, not we, I'm an S, straight as they come, really. But what is it like in New Hampshire with the questioning? Is it easy to approach other, even adults, as well as in the schools, especially teens? Is anything being done? Is it difficult to do? What are some of the problems that you have in doing that kind of thing?
Is it difficult to be a questioning person, or is it difficult for the questioning people to be open?
Is it difficult for the questioning people to find someone to talk to? And is it difficult for, like you folks, to talk with them? Or do you have parents that get outraged at such things, or teachers or counselors, etc.?
Is this like a coming out type question?
No, just anybody who is questioning. How do you handle it?
Well, my favorite thing about New Hampshire, about moving here, is the Insta community. So you have friends, mentors, people who will help as soon as you get here. You're not even like moving in alone. Like, it is instantaneous. So I feel bad for people who aren't in the Liberty community in New Hampshire. I can't really speak to what it's like to be just a person in New Hampshire finding my way by myself, because I've never had to do that.
Yeah, I don't know what it would be like to be a questioning person, but I would imagine it would be very easy to speak with anyone in this community, because like Sabbrielle said, you've already got a common bond that's way more important than who you love.
I mean, ultimately, I think we'd love to get to a place where labels aren't even necessary. Like, you're questioning, fine. It's just figure it out as you go along. There's no rush, you know.
I don't really have so much of a question, but a couple of comments. First off, polyamory is mixing Greek and Latin, and that's just wrong. It should be polygyny or multi-amory.
Point taken.
Secondly, someone had mentioned about multiple spouses, and there's the fear of, well, if we allow a man and a man to marry, then we'll have to allow a man to have multiple wives, and that's legal in a very large amount of the world now, and was legal in the United States until the mid 1800s. So that's just a totally unfounded fear, and most of the people that spout that are quote-unquote Christians, and totally ignore the fact that that was part of the Christian culture and Hebrew culture 2,000 years ago. So it's just a totally unfounded fear.
Don't you love the slippery slope arguments from a libertarian perspective? Like, if we give people this much liberty, then people will want even more liberty.
Yeah.
What are we going to do then? Give them more liberty. That's what we'll do then.
And then the third thing, there was the question about how many letters to add. And Dale, I think you had said that Neil came up with the really good acronym, quilt bag.
Yeah, I can't remember. It's a queer... Oh gosh, I can't.
Undecided, intersex, lesbian, trans, bisexual, asexual, gay, and is there an S for straight on the end? Like where do I fit into the quilt bag?
Make it quilt bags. Why not?
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Daryl.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think we should just really make it a giant H, just like I said earlier. You know, we're all human. We're all.
I started to say very briefly.
That's all.
That's the no labels approach. I'm a big fan of that. By the way, when I said gender is not binary, not even biologically, there are a lot. I don't think people are nearly aware of how many people are born intersexed, meaning they're not clearly male or female biologically. And then you get into trans, which is how someone identifies that may not be in alignment with their body and things like that. So a lot of people have to banish their notions of gender as a strictly binary thing.
Since you all seem to come at these issues from an individual rights perspective, why is it important to frame the debate in terms of LGBT rather than, like you just said, human? We kind of hear this debate with feminism. Why is it necessary to talk about feminism anymore? And do you think, there will come a time when it's not necessary to have an LGBT panel? And maybe would there ever be a time when it would be inappropriate to collectivize rather than speak about individual rights all the time?
That's a really good question.
Well, I think
I like that.
You're naturally going to have some kind of bias. That's another part of being human. So, for example, if you had a close family member, a spouse or something, and they were doing whatever it was, and you'd really support them. You know, if you had your child, you would really want to... you know, if they hit that home run, you're going to cheer them on and cheer them on way harder than every other kid. And so I think that the reason that there are feminists, the reason that there are people who are gay, lesbian activists is because that's it's almost like having a family. Like it's something that you really closely identify with. It's something that you see yourself in that community. So just like you would see in a family scenario, people are just naturally led to that kind of a thing. It's once again just part of being human, I think, to be biased in that positive way, though.
Okay, so I don't have to identify myself as a person with brown hair because people with brown hair aren't discriminated against generally, or at all, I don't think. So 10, 20, 50 years down the road, do you think it will still be common for people to want to root for their team?
I do think it's going to be less of an issue over time, and there's going to be less collectivizing over time. We've even talked about on the show how so much has changed just in the last 5 or 10 years. Look how much more broadly accepted gay marriage is. Look how many states have it now. The federal government is about to recognize marriages made at state levels and so forth. So much has happened so fast, and it is becoming less of an issue that I said, what are we going to do on the show? I think it's just going to become a more of a special interest show, not so much and become less political over time. And that's what I think about, for instance. People are always going to collectivize to some extent, but hopefully in a non-threatening, totally, this is just my thing that I'm into kind of way. I obviously collectivize when I go to a science fiction convention that is not appealing to a lot of people. They're not going to go to that convention because they're not into comic books or Dungeons and Dragons or whatever nerdy thing I'm going there for. And that's fine. But I'm just going there because we share a common interest. And there always will probably be gay bars and things because people, it's probably just, I think it'll come to a point where it will be okay for me to go up to a guy who I think is attractive and just ask him out, and he go, oh, I'm straight, but thank you, I'm flattered anyway, and it'll be over, and it won't be an issue, and then maybe there will be even less need for gay bars and things like that. But to now, they've been necessary so you don't get beat up just because you expressed interest in someone who wasn't gay, and then they were horribly offended that you thought they might be gay, and that's obviously a really negative thing to think about someone, right? And so you insulted me by implying that I might be that. So yeah, I think as it becomes more broadly accepted in society, there's going to be less collectivizing. and it will become less of something that you have to specifically talk about. Same with feminism. As gender issues, as we resolve a lot of those, feminism will probably become less prominent. And that's okay. It's because it's not needed so much anymore. But you're right. It's happening right now because it's necessary, because it's needed.
If you are looking at a specific time frame, I do think it will take multiple generations before we reach that. Just like it'll take multiple generations before we live in that world where people can truly say that, yes, this is a free world. And it'll be parallel to that.
I have to be careful about asking this because I'm sort of asking you to speak for a large group of people, but on the issue of hate crimes, how do you sort of match up the concept of a hate crime with the general liberty movement? Just to give you an example, someone walks up to someone and it shoots them, and then he, said, "Bam, Jew." You get charged for murder, and then you get charged for a hate crime. Murder is murder regardless. Why should the intent, if you believe in hate crime, why should the intent matter when the action should be the only issue that matters, especially in the libertarian movement?
Yeah, I think that that the classification of a hate crime is only useful for like informational purposes, like just to keep track of like how bad things are or how good things are getting. Like, are there fewer hate crimes in this particular region? But I don't think it should affect sentencing. I think that it's the act that matters, not the motive. So that's one area where I don't take the progressive point of view that I, as like whatever person, a bi person or a gay person, should take. I don't believe in.
That might be something we could all touch on briefly. Is how are we uncharacteristic of the general LGBT activist community by virtue of being libertarian? And I think this is one of those things. Hate crimes, and I have changed my attitude a little bit lately about hate crimes. I have held a pretty much traditional libertarian perspective that a crime is a crime. You murdered someone, you beat up from someone and stole from them, or you beat up someone just for the hell of beating them up. Whatever it is, it's a crime, and you handle it as such. And I still generally see it that way. Like you said, it might be important. It's worth categorizing but I have realized that there is something about a hate crime, and at least the notion of a hate crime is that when you do something in a way as to point out, like, I did this to this person because they're gay or because they're black or because they're Muslim or whatever, then you are trying to terrorize that entire community of people. Like, you might be next if you're also in this category of people, kind of thing. But it's a very scary thought for some bureaucratic government person to make the decision that you should be punished more because of your particular reasons for committing the same crime against someone. That's what's scary to me. But I agree with Sabbrielle. Keeping up with it, and because it's an issue to be resolved, right? If there's someone if people are being targeted because they're in a certain category, then that's something that needs to be addressed maybe in a community. Figure out why that's happening. But I don't believe, for instance, in anti-discrimination laws, period, across the board. I don't want to add gay to that because that's the case right now. Is there are a lot of anti-discrimination laws that don't include gay people or trans people or whatever, but they mostly include things like religion and gender and race and things like that. And I'm for not having them. And I'm not quite the. I don't feel like I don't want to just add gay people to that until we get rid of anti-discrimination laws.
I feel like it builds resentment in those who don't already have it. If they're wrongly charged with a hate crime or their friends or family are affected by it, I definitely think the focus on the crime.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's a problem. I want to solve the problem. Is government the solution to it? And I would say no. That's why I'm libertarian about it. Is if hate crime is a problem, then we have a culture to address. We have a culture of hate to address that we need to try and find a way to address that. And I don't find government good at addressing those kinds of problems.
Or any problems, really.
Are we done? I think anyone else have any questions for us? I think we're right on time right now. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. You know what? I'll give everyone a chance. I'll give everyone a chance to just mention real quick what they're doing right now. So if you want to follow up on anything, I'm going to plug my show, flamingfreedom.com. We're now on Ustream. You can watch us live when we're doing our live shows, or you can download our podcast, or you can watch the recorded show on Ustream for a period of time until the space runs out and then they get bumped off. But that's mainly what I've been up to. Lauren?
I too am part of Flaming Freedom to some extent. Slowly but surely I'm kind of getting into it. Because I've always loved radio, and finally it's like a chance to actually get back on it again after a lot of years. So anyway, yeah, I'm involved with Flaming Freedom. If anyone has any questions for me, they want to just catch me after this, I'll be around. I'm pretty easy to spot. So thanks so much for having me here. It's been really fun.
Yeah, I co-host on Flaming Freedom once or twice a month. And also I want to give a shout out to a newish podcast called A Darker Shade of Liberty, which is as Flaming Freedom is to the LGBT spectrum, A Darker Shade of Liberty is to the people of color. So it's kind of reaching out. Obviously, I'm pretty white, but Daniel Cuevas likes me a lot and makes me an honorary Dominican woman when I come on the show. So
I'm an honorary Mexican, by the way.
Oh, yeah. It only lasts for 4 hours, so you might need to renew that. One of the things that he and I talked about the last time I was on his show was affirmative action, and so that made the hate crimes thing reminded me of that.
And that show comes out of the same studios as Flaming Freedom.
Yeah, so that's what I'm doing right now.
I do a show called Peace News Now that you can check out 7 days a week at peacenewsnow.com, and there's also a live show that airs twice a week on the same website.
Cool. All right. Thanks, panelists. And thank you everyone for joining us today.
All right. What a great panel. Informative and very human. Maybe we should call it the human panel next year. I like it. I was talking with Eric Freerock. I don't know if he's in the room right now. I don't see him. Oh, there he is. So apparently cop blocking was happening last night, and there was a good group of about 15 people. But of course, City of Keene knows we're here. And so it appears that they turned on special encrypted mode on their communications last night, specifically to make it so that we couldn't hear them on the police scanner. So even though we have we've got a fairly expensive police scanner here in town, I purchased a $450 scanner that's what feeds. If you go to freekeene.com, there's a 24/7 feed there of the Keene police. And most of the time you can hear what they're talking about, but they have some sort of an extra encryption mode. Like it's normally digital, but now it's like encrypted. So they flip on this encryption whenever it is they don't want us to hear what they're saying. And the scanner wasn't really picking up anything last night, so I suspect they had their encrypted mode on, which made it more difficult to find their location. So that's kind of similar to.
They were communicating with state police last night.
With the state police.
They stayed out late. Actually, the cop blockers got caught in the middle of a manhunt, including state police.
Yeah, I heard about that. So there was some action later on in the evening, and hopefully that was interesting for those of you who went out. Thanks, Eric, for putting that together. And of course, cop blocking is a relatively common activity up here in the Keene area. So let's see, coming up, stay tuned. In about 5 minutes, we're going to kick off the secession panel, and that should be enlightening. In addition to that, of course, lunch is going to be coming up afterwards. If you are a VIP attendee of Keenevention, you may be signed up for lunch. There is that sign-up sheet at the registration table. And I would recommend carpooling. If you have other VIP attendees, you can carpool to Mandrick's house. Again, there are maps at the registration table. Carpooling's good because it's just a residential home, so there's on-street parking. So that would be a good idea there. And of course, our friend Rich Paul is in jail. You are welcome to go go and visit him. He is there all weekend. Actually, he's going to be there till December. So if you're looking for something to do this weekend, it's a good way to spend a half an hour of your time. You'll get to meet Rich, and he's a real entertaining character. You will not regret going and taking the time to visit him, even if you are going. Whether you're going with alone or with a group. I know Wendy is putting together a visit. Was it tomorrow, Wendy?
6 o'clock.
Tonight or tomorrow? Tomorrow at 6 o'clock, Wendy is going to visit, and she's going to put 3 names on as a group visit. So if you want to go with somebody else who knows Rich, you could maybe talk to Wendy. Would that be okay? All right, so see Wendy if you want to go and see Rich tomorrow at 6 p.m. And again, the secession panel will be taking the stage here in just a few minutes. So hang out, meet some folks, and thank you.
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeene.com. Freekeene.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeene.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeene.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.